If there's one place where the Pacific Ocean really lives up to its name, it's here. A very Pacific and very fertile 700-mile arm of the ocean known as the Gulf of California, or the Sea of Cortez. And between the arm and the ocean's main body, a desert, a forest of cactus, with cactus forest animals, some of them like the animals of any forest, and some as prickly as the cactus itself. This land is almost as dry as the sea is wet, and the air is so empty of moisture, so invisible, that sometimes it seems possible to see every star there is. The Sea of Cortez and the peninsula of Baja, California fit together like two fingers from different hands. A sliver of land split from the continent, a sliver of sea split from the ocean. The peninsula's west coast, pounded by the Pacific, is much like the rest of the coast of the Americas. But to go around the southern tip at Cape San Lucas is to enter a world of almost eerie tranquility, studded with more than 100 islands, each with its own unique character. As recently as 300 years ago, volcanoes were active here, and the terrain now is as rugged as only a newly shaped landscape can be. It's only been as dry as this for 10,000 years, which in geology is no time at all. But in places, it's the driest land on Earth. Years can pass without a drop of moisture. When clouds do cross the peninsula, they drop rain like water bombs, drenching some areas and leaving others bone dry. Almost nowhere else on the planet is rainfall so unreliable, and the result is thickets of strange, shaggy shapes that don't look like they belong on this planet. The priority for everything is to catch water when it comes and to keep it for as long as possible. And that can produce contortions. The branches of the elephant tree are like metallic storage tanks, and the leaves are built like rubber plugs. They only appear when there's enough water to support them. Otherwise, they're an extravagance. No rain, and they're dropped. It can happen several times a year. These horizontal water tank branches also happen to make good nesting platforms. A tiny Costa's hummingbird has brought nectar to her chick. The demand for nectar is constant, so the other important quality in a nesting platform is the nearness of the source. Sometimes, in some years, the only possible source is the Pauladan tree, with its flame-like blossoms and its thorns strung out like barbed wire to protect the store of water in its branches. This is meted out in nectar through the tubular flowers, purpose-made for the beaks of hummingbirds. The unwitting midwives in the Pauladan's reproduction process. As the hummingbird drinks, the flower's anthers touch its head, leaving a crown of pollen stuck so firmly that the most vigorous preening can't brush it off. The only thing, in fact, that can remove the pollen is the next pauladan flower the hummingbird sips from, which lifts off the yellow powder as though it were a hat. The flowers may be custom-made for hummingbirds, but an antelope ground squirrel couldn't care less. Nectar is nectar, and the desert is dry, and if you're nimble enough, even murderous thorns don't matter. When the squirrel slips and grabs, the thorns pierce nothing but air. The tree's only defense is to make more flowers than it needs, and to write off the losses. Cacti are shaped in a way that minimizes evaporation, and what works for cacti works for anything. This spindly tower of a plant, the boojum, isn't a cactus at all, but a relative of the pauladan tree. The true cactus on the skyline is the giant cardon. It's the high-rise home to the ladder-backed woodpecker, with its special feet and tail feathers for grasping the cardon's smooth sides. This is a male delivering grubs to the chicks that wait in their water-cooled cactus apartment. Like any other plant, the cardon makes allowances for its freeloaders, and the woodpecker holes don't really harm it. But in time, a very long time, it does die and decay, and its woody ribs are revealed like steel girders. These once supported a structure that was 6 stories tall and weighed more than 10 tons. In a place where leaves are an invitation to evaporation, cacti have evolved to do without them. Their skin is not only waxy and watertight, it's green and does the leaves' job of processing sunlight into food. But that means they can't have bark. So for protection, they have spines, and these can be as variable as leaves on other kinds of plants. The obvious purpose of spines is to threaten and to stab, but there always seems to be something that can penetrate even the most vicious defenses. The cholla cactus's resident cactus wren uses a careful step and horny feet to turn the spines into a place to live and to use them for its own protection. Having to move by foot rather than wing is a slight disadvantage, but the ground squirrel seems to transform the thorns into something like the rungs of a ladder. The reward at the top is a succulent fruit. And the return trip is like walking down a staircase. A few spines have hit their mark, but pulling spines out of feet and food is just part of living in the desert. Anyway, the squirrel is doing the cactus a favor. After it's eaten the fruit, it'll be spreading the seeds. But spines are nothing when there are more important things to worry about. The Harris hawk is one of the desert's few large predators, and the ground squirrel is a top item on its menu. As this young desert evolved, the plants to survive needed one quality above all: hardiness. So did the animals. The collared lizard, ounce for ounce, is one of Baja California's most formidable killers. It's a foot long, with strong legs and bone-crushing jaws. There are a lot of smaller creatures here, and it can catch and eat most of them. This unfortunate is a side-blotched lizard. It all began 4.5 million years ago with a continent-splitting earthquake, and the resulting peninsula of land is only half the story. The other half is the peninsula of sea. As the Gulf widened, islands rose and basins sank, as deep as 2 miles in places. The Sea of Cortez may lack the waves of the Pacific proper, but it does have tides, and the currents they create can flow faster than rivers. And in the narrow central part of the Gulf, where a cluster of islands constricts the channel, the tides rush like rapids, creating turbulence and stirring up cool waters rich in both oxygen and nourishing blooms of tiny plants and animals, plankton. The plants and animals may be small, but their predators can be any size. The manta ray, for example. This relative of the shark is over 20 feet across and weighs more than 1.5 tons, a bulk sustained entirely by plankton. The green sea turtle is another creature whose weight is measurable in tonnage. This gentle reptile is the most common of the world's half-dozen kinds of sea turtle, and many of them find the Sea of Cortez a rich feeding ground. Like the manta ray, it seems to survive on the tiniest of organisms, in this case green algae, which it shears from the rocks with beak-like jaws. For much of their long lives, green turtles wander extensively in the deep oceans, but what they eat there, and what they do there generally, is still a mystery. The jawfish, on the other hand, never wanders at all, or never more than a foot from the mouth of its burrow. And anything that wanders too close to a jawfish is likely to be met with a mouthful of sand. But that's not just pugnacity. The fish is also cleaning out its burrow, keeping a roomy retreat in case of genuine danger. It's the abundance and variety of animals that set the large, rich backwater apart. From the kaleidoscopic swarms of tiny fish to the patrolling schools of fish-eating jacks. And hammerhead sharks cruise on automatic pilot. It's a time of day for resting, and what these females are doing is something like sleepwalking. They're gathered into a moving dormitory with the older sharks at the vulnerable top levels of the school and the whole semi-conscious mass relying on safety and numbers. Pelicans, these are brown pelicans, may look ungainly, but as hunters of fish, they are precise and delicately skillful. More brown pelicans now nest on the islands of the Sea of Cortez than anywhere else in the world, and these isolated sanctuaries are essential to a wealth of other seabirds. One island in particular is famous for its vast colonies of birds, some of which nest nowhere else, Rasa Island. It's only 1 square mile, but for a few months every year, nearly 350,000 birds somehow find room to live and breed. Two kinds of tern lay their eggs here. The larger is the royal tern, with its broader bill and white-flecked crown. And the smaller is the delicate and aptly named elegant tern. But even when they're standing side by side, it takes an experienced eye to tell them apart. During the year, both types manage to range far over the Pacific, but the elegant tern has no other breeding colony and flies thousands of miles to lay its eggs on Rasa Island. The tern colonies are like an enclave in the midst of the swarms of Heermann's gulls. But there are only so many of these birds because this is essentially all there are. They also nest nowhere else. The more birds there are, the less land there is for each pair, and real estate becomes increasingly valuable. An unmated male finds himself running a gauntlet of fiercely nest-proud couples. In a mass like this, it's good beaks that make good neighbors. In the late afternoon, a lot of the birds get away from the madding crowds by retreating to the water, where they form another, if slightly less competitive, crowd. An island this packed with birds doesn't leave much room for other kinds of animals. And some of the ones that have found themselves crannies here occasionally seem to spit in protest. geyser-like squirts are just a byproduct of mussels, sensing a bird and suddenly clamming up. At night, the flying continues over the Sea of Cortez. Only now the fish are being picked off by mammals, bats. Thousands of fish-eating bats take off from and land in the crevices of a few rocky hillsides. The bat's teeth are fine for holding and eating the fish, but the claws on its feet are the hooks that have caught them. With nothing to eat but fish and no water to drink but seawater, these little animals are as much marine mammals as seals or whales. Their bodies even expel salts in the same way that whales' bodies do. And they locate fish by sound-bouncing radar, no different in principle from a dolphin's sonar. They're sea bats. Although the infant snuggling into its mother's fur is decidedly warm and dry. Bats aren't the only creatures to come out of the rocks at nightfall. Back on the peninsula, scorpions also live by night. They're the driest of dry land animals and also among the most ancient. And on Baja, California, they flourish. There are more than 60 species here, 2/3 of them found nowhere else. This one scuttles across the loose sand, while this one's built like a tank and can burrow through the soil. All scorpions have stings, although most are no stronger than a bee's, and some are potent enough to kill a human. The young are born alive and hang on to their mother's back for several weeks before striking off on their own. The sting and the claws make mating hazardous. The scorpions perform a delicate dance that can end in either sex or death, or both. While he convinces her of his intentions, the smaller male has to keep a firm grip on the female's pincers, or courtship can turn into cannibalism. They found a good, flat dancing surface, but as with any animal, courtship absorbs the concentration and danger can be sensed too late. For a diminutive yucca night lizard, though, scorpions are too big to handle. In fact, the scorpion is more likely to eat the lizard. This one certainly could. The hadrous scorpion, 6 inches long, is the largest in the world, and its sting and claws are a deadly combination. But the night lizard has a few tricks of its own. It sometimes survives the scorpion's sting, and it can shed its tail in the heat of the struggle. But as a tactic, it's costly. A lot of time and energy goes into growing a new tail. Throughout Baja California, the scarcity of water has led to an assortment of spiny plants. Since plants anywhere are the basic source of food, the animals that do best here are the ones that can get past the spines. Generally, that means small. The wood rat is not necessarily designed for deserts, but it can still get through to the succulent parts of the cactus. Wood rats even use cactus debris to build their large and well-insulated nests. So the cactus, far from deterring wood rats, actually protects them from the extremes of the desert climate. Perhaps the best protection for a desert animal is a burrow. Those creatures that are designed for deserts are generally able to dig. In the case of the kangaroo rat, which gets its name from the way it moves, speed is important too. Its hind legs guarantee fast travel and at the same time leave the sensitive forepaws free to forage for seeds. These are starchy and dry, but part of the rat's desert design is a digestive system that can convert starch into water and a waste system that doesn't require fluid. It can live its whole life without ever drinking a drop or even tasting a juicy leaf. When the moon makes the night dangerously bright, the burrow is a safe retreat. It's only a foot below the surface, but that's enough to keep the temperature low and steady night and day. The passages are narrow enough to keep out the larger predators, and there are plenty of back doors for a quick exit. It's after an exit that danger becomes serious. If the kangaroo rat didn't have to gather seeds, it would be safer never to go to the surface at all. The rattlesnake goes hungry, this time. Another way to be safe is to go up. Here among the spines, the cactus mouse finds a comfortable place to nap. After Brer Rabbit was thrown in the briar patch, he shouted, "It was where I was born and raised." He and the cactus mouse might have added, "and evolved as well." This is simply home. The mouse can even find comfort of a more conventional kind. A cactus wren's family has grown up and flown, and the nest has been abandoned. For an animal more used to life's harder edges, this is pure luxury. Dawn in Baja California's desert uplands. The sun reaches a sheltered canyon and an oasis. In the midst of a spiny furnace, palm trees. Wild palms used to be common throughout North America. Now they're found mainly in a few gorges in Baja California. The few places where there's water every day, all through the year. The trees live here and animals visit. Desert bighorn sheep come regularly to drink and browse. More than a third of the world's desert bighorns live on this peninsula. Where there's plenty to eat and drink, thoughts soon turn to other things. This ram senses that a nearby ewe will soon be in season. That means he'll have to keep a close watch on her and the other ewes in his territory for several weeks, because a ewe is only actually receptive for a few days each year. With hooves like sneakers, the sheep can grip the smooth rock surfaces where a slip can mean death. Large mammals are animals of continents, and Baja California, for all its isolation, is still at least connected to mainland North America. On the islands in the Gulf, the same sort of terrain has nothing resembling sheep. What they have are birds of all kinds, sometimes strange kinds. On San Pedro Martir Island, home to tens of thousands of seabirds, it's the ones known as the blue-footed boobies that steal the show. If bighorn sheep have sneakers, this bird has the original pair of blue suede shoes. The male's feet are the essence of his sexuality. When he comes into land, he flashes them for the benefit of his mate like landing lights. The booby is a type of gannet, and if its name seems cruel, it is apt. During courtship and the bonding display, the male goose steps proudly, and to the female, impressively. Boobies preen constantly. By the look of it, a match based on the blueness of feet is made in heaven. Occasionally, a pair will be overtaken by the urge to dance, tying their bond ever tighter. While some court, others nurture the results of courtship. There are birds of all ages in the colony. Boobies live exclusively on fish, which is fortunate for the lizards that forage among the nests. There are two kinds of lizards here, and they live only on this island. Huge numbers of them rely on morsels found in the nest litter, mostly scraps of fish that are dropped during the messy business of feeding the young. Dry land lizards that live on fish. Almost all of the islands in the Sea of Cortez support unique communities of plants and animals. Every single one has either a snake or a lizard found on none of the other islands, on the peninsula, or on the mainland. This island chakawalla is nearly 3 times the size of its peninsular relatives. At more than 2 feet long, it looks like a baby dinosaur as it sits on top of a cardon cactus, warming up in the sun before starting the day's foraging. These chakawallas and the other island reptiles have evolved in extreme isolation. Their distant ancestors were of a common stock, left high and dry as the Gulf filled up around them. Now they've changed size, for example, as conditions on each particular island have allowed. Where there are mammals out here, they're sea mammals, sea lions enjoying the remoteness of these sanctuaries. Juvenile males have chosen a submerged rock as a place to play. In years to come, the skills they're practicing now will be serious tools in their battles for the right to breed. For the moment, a sea lion's life is pure harmony. It's the breeding season, and the colony is dominated by the bulls, of which only the largest will have the opportunity to mate. A bull in his prime is distinguished by the jut of his forehead. The only limit to the number of females one bull can have is the number he can defend from the other bulls. And that often means more time spent fighting than actually mating. The bachelors, for their part, are constantly on the lookout for females that have been allowed to stray. And the dominant male has to be constantly ready to reclaim her. The fact that the bulls are underwater does nothing to dampen their antagonism. They're still roaring at each other, or at least looking as though they are. The dominant bull isn't dominant for nothing. As always, he wins and makes a hero's return to his admiring harem. On Rasa Island, a month has passed since the terns and gulls began laying their eggs. Thousands of hungry little mouths beg for their rations of fish, and with so much delivery traffic, it's easy to get trampled on. The robust royal terns deliver their catch fairly easily. But the smaller elegants are more vulnerable to the marauding Heermann's gulls. The air raids can leave them looking mugged, shaken and bloody. Even if they dodge the gulls' airborne assaults, that's not necessarily the end of it. The gulls can make land attacks as well. And once they've grabbed something, their squabble isn't over either. Now they have each other to fight. These blizzards of birds are just an extension of the abundance of life in the sea. The Sea of Cortez may be remote, tranquil and rich, but in terms of human influence, it's no virgin. Like virtually every other corner of the planet, it's been, and will probably continue to be, corrupted. No living system in the world is entirely isolated from all the others. The massive manta ray is overfished, but even the plankton it feeds on is being damaged. Throughout the world, seas are poisoned by chemicals and attacked by ultraviolet rays beaming through a tattered ozone layer. But the finger of land may have a slightly safer future. Its mountainous spine is so inhospitable that vast areas still lie beyond the reach of all but the most determined human attempts to intrude. Long a refuge for wildlife, this land of the desert bighorn has changed little since unknown hands decorated the rocks with its portrait many centuries ago. No one knows who these people were, but whoever they were, it's clear from their paintings that they saw themselves as only a part of the overall picture. And what a picture. Even to them, Baja California and the Sea of Cortez must have seemed bizarre, remote and extreme. Brown, green, blue, white. Dry, wet, rich, barren. Here, a stunning desert resonates in harmony with a fertile sea and provides a place where there's still peace enough to let imagination wander amongst the stars of a desert night.